Hello and welcome. My name is Jeff Stovall and I'll be covering the D module of this course. It'll cover the FDA Regulations 210 and 211. Our main goal for this module is to provide you with the general knowledge of Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR, specifically Parts 210 and 211. If you're not familiar with CFRs, they are essentially the rule and laws that govern regulated industries. Example of these regulated industries include air travel, which is regulated by the FAA or the Federal Aviation Administration, nuclear power generation, which is regulated by the NRC or the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and what we'll be discussing today, pharmaceutical manufacturing, which is regulated by the FDA or the Food and Drug Administration. As we navigate through this module, we do have some enabling objectives. These objectives will be for the student to identify some key definitions per the regulation, to know the requirements not only for organizational personnel, but also buildings and equipment, to know the requirements for control of manufacturing components, as well as drug product containers and closures, and lastly, know the requirements for production and process controls. Before we get started, I would like to discuss the FDA and describe a little about its history and how it came to be. I've talked to many people entering the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry, and they know very little about the FDA or their rules and regulations. It all started in 1905 when Upton Sinclair wrote a book titled The Jungle. Sinclair wanted to expose the harsh conditions that workers were exposed to in the meatpacking industry. So he went undercover and he got a job at a meatpacking plant and began recording his observations. During his observations, he witnessed the poor conditions that employees were forced to work under. He recorded that. But he also recorded details of the meat and how sometimes the meat was rancid, how it was rotten, and how it was still packaged and shipped out to the public. He documented digits, fingers, hands, body parts being caught in machines and churned up with the meat, rats, rodents, other things being caught in the machines and churned up, mixed in with the meat, packaged and shipped out to the public. So naturally, when his book was published and the public read it, there was outrage when they discovered what they were eating. So much outrage that it led to a quote that Sinclair said, "I aimed for the public's heart and hit it in the stomach." But ultimately that outcry led to the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. That allowed the FDA to warn the public about poor conditions from facilities so that they were aware of some of the bad stuff that they were taking. But that's the only power that the FDA had at that time. That act only allowed them to warn the public. In 1935, a company had a successful tablet that cured strep. They decided to create a liquid form of that tablet due to demand. What they ultimately did was dissolve the tablet in diethylene glycol. They added flavoring to mask the bitter taste, and they shipped it out. Well, it turns out that the diethylene glycol, or otherwise known as antifreeze, was toxic to the human body, and approximately 100 people died. So the FDA stepped in and in 1938 established the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. This led to the FDA being allowed to remove products from market if they were harmful, and it also implemented extreme testing for products prior to them being released, making sure that there was extensive testings on products to ensure their safety. In 1941, there were 300 people that were injured or killed by a company that released a sedative-tainted tablet. And that led to an amendment in 1948 where the FDA started looking at the manufacturing of products and started focusing on quality control. In 1963, there was a close call. The FDA refused to release a pill in the United States that was being used in Europe, and ultimately in Europe there were 10,000 cases of infant deformities. So that was a close call that the FDA prevented here in the United States. In 1978, the FDA began including medical devices into their area of responsibility and control. So not only was it medicine, but they then started to focus on medical devices as well. And in 1990, or in the 90s, the FDA received authority to go into research and development and add pre-production controls to GMP regulations. So how were these processes being made? How were these products being made? They started to get into the research and development. So that's a little history on the FDA and how they came to be. Compliance to their rules and regulations is non-negotiable. Awareness is paramount. Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations codifies the FDA's requirements for good manufacturing practices, or GMP as you'll hear it throughout these modules, in pharmaceutical and medical device facilities. Manufacturers are required by law to follow these rules in all departments, and these departments include manufacturing, processing, packing, and holding finished pharmaceuticals or medical devices. So specifically, Part 210 of the rule covers current good manufacturing practices in the manufacturing, processing, packing, or holding of drugs, and Part 211 covers current good manufacturing practices for finished pharmaceuticals. As I mentioned numerous times, compliance to the rule is crucial. Failure to comply may cause products to become adulterated, which basically means it'll never be released to the public. It means that it must be destroyed, which will cause unnecessary time, resources, and costs to the company. Also, regulatory violations can occur for failures to comply with regulations. And maybe one of the scariest impacts would be to the patient. If products are not produced per GMPs and they are released to the public, it could have significant negative impacts to the patient, up to and including death. Part 210 covers numerous definitions, and I'd like to go over some of the common ones. When reading and reviewing the CFR, the term Act refers to the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which, as discussed earlier, was established in 1938. A drug product is defined as a finished dosage form that contains an active drug ingredient in association with an inactive ingredient. And in case you're like me, I was wondering what the key difference between active and inactive ingredients are. Active ingredients are the components that have a therapeutic effect on the body, whereas inactive ingredients are the components in a drug that have non-medicinal importance. The term also includes a finished dosage form that does not contain an active ingredient, but is only intended to be used as a placebo. The terms manufacturer, processing, packing, or holding of drug product refer to the processes of packaging, labeling, testing, and/or quality control of drug products. If you are interested in entering the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry, your chances of holding one or more of these roles is certain. A quality control unit is defined in the regulation as any person or organizational element designated responsible for the duties relating to quality control. A batch refers to a specific quantity intended to have uniform character and quality produced during the same cycle of manufacture. And lot is a batch produced in a unit of time or quantity that assures it having uniform character and quality within specified limits. In pharmaceuticals, you will hear terms lot number, control number, or batch number. These are any distinctive combination of letters, numbers, or symbols from which the complete history can be determined. Now that we've covered the definitions and terms you need to be familiar with, head on out to the blackboard and complete Activity 1 for this module. When you're done with it, come on back and we'll move to the next section. Well, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that crossword and helped learn those definitions a little bit easier. The next section we're going to discuss is Part 211 of the CFR and its numerous subparts. Please note that we will not cover all the subparts in their entirety, but it will cover the ones that we feel the most important for this course. Subpart A describes the scope of Part 211, which ultimately contains the minimum current good manufacturing practice for preparation of drug products for administration to humans or animals. Please note that this part does not include drugs used for positron emission tomography or PET scans. Subpart B of Part 211 addresses the organization and its personnel. It describes the responsibilities of quality control units, personnel qualifications, personnel responsibilities, and the use of consultants. Subpart B of 211 addresses requirements for quality control. It specifies that there shall be a quality control unit that shall have the responsibility and authority to approve or reject all components, drug product containers, closures, in-process materials, packaging material, labeling, and drug products. Furthermore, they shall have the authority to review production records to assure that no errors have occurred, or if there have been errors that have occurred, that they have been fully investigated. And all testing of the products for the approval or rejection shall take place in an adequate laboratory facility. They also have quality control over contracted products, making sure that they are able to approve or reject contracted products, and also procedures. SOPs, or standard operating procedures, drive our daily activity. All of our processes are from a procedure. They have the ultimate authority to approve or reject procedures or specifications if it impacts a product. So 211 Subpart B also covers personnel qualifications. It drives that each person that is involved in the manufacturing, processing, packing, or holding of a drug product shall have education, training, and experience, or a combination thereof, that enables that person to perform that assigned function. So essentially it's saying anybody that is involved in the process of manufacturing a pharmaceutical must be trained and qualified to perform that role. So the learning and development programs, the training programs at these facilities are extensive to make sure that our folks are able to perform the roles that they're assigned to, and that training also involves good manufacturing practices, documentation practices, current good manufacturing practices. So there's a lot of training that is going to be implemented with associates that are involved in pharmaceutical manufacturing. Also, supervisors shall be qualified. Anybody that is in a supervisory role, a leadership role, shall be qualified to do so. Lots of decisions have to be made in the processes. Lots of regulatory compliance decisions have to be made, so it's crucial that supervisors are aware of the regulatory rules so that they make sure that they don't impact negatively the company with decisions that they make. And also, there should be an adequate number of personnel. So essentially, it is saying that there shall be an adequate number of qualified personnel to perform and supervise the manufacturing process, packaging, or holding of each drug product. So if there's processes being done at a facility, the rule states there shall be an adequate number of personnel to do so. Part B also covers personnel responsibilities. So associates that are in pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities do have a responsibility. Part of it is proper clothing or dress requirements for their assigned duty. If they are assigned in an area that requires them to wear protective clothing, such as lab coats, beard covers, hair nets, safety glasses, shoe covers, gloves, things of that sort, it's their responsibility to ensure that they wear them properly, and they wear them every time. At the end of the day, those are designed to ensure that contamination of the product does not occur. Also, good sanitation and health habits, making sure that housekeeping is a responsibility of everybody, making sure that it doesn't become unsanitary or unhealthy in the area, because that will transfer to the product. Also, controlled access areas, making sure that only personnel authorized by supervisory personnel enter areas designated in certain facilities. So making sure that access areas that need to be controlled are maintained. And also, employees have a responsibility to report health or injury to their supervisors. If they have open wounds or they are themselves under the weather, they should not be working near a product, or they should take measures to cover an injury or a wound so that it does not impact the product or the production. So those are some responsibilities that personnel have as employees of a pharmaceutical manufacturing company. It does happen quite often in the pharmaceutical manufacturing business, the use of consultants to come in and help support functions within the company. But there is a regulatory rule that makes sure if consultants are being used, that they are sufficiently qualified in the role that they're being asked to perform and support, and the documented qualifications and their consulting role has to be kept at the facility. So not only do they have to be qualified, there has to be documentation in which the facility deems them qualified and what role they are going to perform. So pretty specific on the use of consultants. So at this time, we've covered some very important information in 21 CFR Part 211, subparts A and B. So return to the blackboard and do me a favor, read the FDA warning letter that describes numerous violations in a facility, and when you're done, answer the Activity 2 discussion questions. And then come back and we'll go into the next section. All right, and welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that kind of case study and discussion questions. Sometimes it's quite amazing what some companies allow or what's going on out there. But those can be found on the FDA's website, by the way, if you want to ever take a look around. But as we move to subpart C, that part of the CFR covers buildings and facilities. It makes sure that facility design and construction is adequate for pharmaceutical manufacturing. It covers lighting, it covers ventilation, plumbing, sanitation, maintenance. All of those things have strict guidelines and rules that have to be adhered to for a manufacturing facility. Making sure that there is proper lighting. There's not dark areas. There's not areas where it's difficult to see. Ventilation, making sure that rooms are properly ventilated. Exhaust fans, weigh rooms when you're weighing the raw materials, making sure there's proper ventilation. Naturally, plumbing, sanitation, maintenance. So lots of rules that deal with the buildings and facilities themselves. All right, so subpart D covers equipment. It covers equipment design, size, and location. Very specific in making sure that the design and size of equipment is adequate for the product that it is being utilized for. Also, equipment construction, making sure that equipment that is holding pharmaceutical products isn't made of a material that could bleed into the product, be absorbed by the product, thus changing the product's end state and ultimately possibly harming the public. So equipment construction is a huge regulatory focus. Also, cleaning and maintenance of equipment is a huge thing, making sure that all equipment is cleaned all the time to prevent any type of bacteria growth, black mold, any dangerous elements that can be transferred into the product the next time that it is manufactured, thus leading to the public and harming the public. It also covers automatic, mechanical, and electronic equipment. as well as filters, making sure that filters are utilized and optimized to form their correct function, whether it's inline filters, whether it's filters in a weigh room with materials, but making sure that filters are performing their protection factor that they're designed to do. The Subpart E covers control of components, drug product containers, and closures. Basically, drug product containers and closures shall not be reactive, additive, or absorptive. That's what we talked about, making sure that the containers don't bleed into the product or the product doesn't absorb anything from that material. Container closure systems shall provide adequate protection, making sure that the product doesn't get out, making sure it stays sealed. Drug product containers and closures shall be clean. Again, cleanliness in pharmaceutical manufacturing is a huge deal. Making sure that everything is clean all the time, and then naturally follow written procedures. We talked about SOPs a little bit earlier. It is crucial that the procedures are followed to a T. One thing about it is you can be engaged and you can look at a procedure and take some issues to team lead supervision and possibly get a procedure revised to remove unnecessary steps or to include necessary steps. However, procedures have to be followed all the time. So Subpart E covers medical gas containers and closures. It covers their labels. So naturally you can't open these containers and see what's in them because it's a gas. So the labels have very strict regulation. They can't be susceptible to becoming worn or inadvertently detached during normal use. And they have to be reasonably resistant to fading and durable when exposed to atmospheric conditions, and not readily soluble in the water. So if it is exposed to the elements, water shouldn't wash it off. It shouldn't fade easily, because like I said just a second ago, you can't open the container and see what's in it. Last thing you want to do is have a label that comes off or fades, and then you have a tank of gas that you can't identify what it is. So pretty strict rules on the labels for containers. And speaking of, medical gas containers will have labels, color identified. So if you see colored labels, green is for oxygen, is nitrous oxide, air, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, cyclopropane. So part F is production and process control. So that's ultimately the backbone of a compliant facility, is the creation and adherence to production and process controls. The biggest thing is you can come up with processes to meet compliance, to meet regulation rules, but the people that are implementing the processes have to adhere to the processes. If they don't adhere to the processes, you run the risk of being non-compliant. So pharmaceutical manufacturing, it is extremely important that you adhere to the process and their controls. Processes and procedures are validated to ensure the expected result is obtained. So that's why it is crucial that you follow your SOPs. When you have your result, you compare it. Is it what you expected? If so, great. If not, what happened? Was the SOP followed to a T? Was there a missing step in the SOP? Was there an issue with products or anything like that? But you start your evaluation there. Any deviations, as we just kind of mentioned there, is introduces unnecessary risk. If you deviate from an SOP, if you deviate from a process, it leads to an unnecessary risk. So again, I cannot reiterated enough, adherence to production and process controls is the backbone to a compliant facility. And at the end of the day, written procedures, their main goal is to ensure that our products that we produce have the identity, the strength, the quality, and the purity that we advertise that they have. Our procedures get us to that end product, so it's extremely important to make sure at the end of it we compare our products to have the identity, strength, the quality, and the purity that they're advertised to have. So naturally, written procedures shall include all requirements of this subpart, and there should be a process to make sure that procedures are drafted, reviewed, and approved every so often to make sure everything remains current. And when we talk about drafted and reviewed, and we go back to personnel qualifications, making sure that folks in those key decisions and supervisors are qualified, this falls right into the line of that. Making sure that folks that are reviewing procedures understand the processes, understand the requirements, the CFR, to ensure that everything remains compliant. So written procedures are a huge part of the regulatory rule. One thing as we talk about too with pharmaceutical manufacturing is calculation of yield. It's a percentage figured at each stage of the process. It has to be performed and verified at each stage, and if there's any automated equipment used, it has to be independently verified. And essentially what the calculation of yield is if generically, if I say I'm going to mix raw material and we're going to have 10,000 gallons of this product, I mix all of the raw materials, I yield 10,000 gallons, so I have to document I've recorded that. I send it over to the packaging department. They begin filling up the pumps and they start bottling the product. Well, they have leaks, they have leaky bottles, they have defective bottles, they have to destroy product. So of that 10,000 gallons that they received, they only bottled 9,000 bottles, or 9,000 gallons, excuse me. That 1,000 gallons has to be annotated, has to be documented, recorded, saved if possible, and then once it goes to the warehouse, they have a documented, I have 9,000 gallons yield. So calculation of yield is crucial. All product has to be accounted for, and that is subpart F. All compounding and storage containers, processing lines, and other major equipment used during the production of a batch of a drug shall be properly identified at all times to indicate their contents and, when necessary, the phase of processing of the batch. If there's any type of major equipment, it shall be identified by a distinctive identification number or code, and it shall be recorded in the batch production record to show the specific equipment that was used in the manufacturing of each batch. In cases where only one of a particular type of equipment exists in a manufacturing facility, the name of the equipment may be used in lieu of the distinctive qualification number or code. So as you can see, subpart F is very specific in the rule for utilizing equipment used in the compounding. So as we wrap up this module, I do want to go back and take a little bit of time to review. Title 21 CFR Part 210 covers current good manufacturing practices in manufacturing, processing, packing, or holding of drugs. And 21 CFR Part 211 covers the current good manufacturing practices for finished pharmaceuticals. Like I said, there's numerous subparts to 211. We covered a few of them, not all of them, but covered several of the important ones. So in our last activity, what I'd like you to do is watch this short video of a peanut corporation of America that had an issue and suffered severe consequences. So listen to it, and then what I'd like you to do is go out to the blackboard and look at Activity 3 discussion question. I hope you've enjoyed this module and you've learned a little bit about the FDA. and its parts and its importance for compliance. And I wish you luck in the remainder of this course. Thank you.